ready to go. Okay, we're live. Get the link real quick. Okay, here we go. All right. So link is should be in the Jumbotron in a second. Let me see. Comment. And here we go. So, all right. So if y'all want to follow along here or on Spaces, feel free to. Okay, Tansy's here. Let's get her up on co-host. All righty. Oh, Dennis is here as well. Let me get Dennis on the video. Okay, great. How you doing, Dennis? You might have to unmute your mic. I can't hear you, but I see you in the room.
What's up, brother Dennis?
Asun, did you want to lead it off, or Tansy?
Yeah, we're gonna let Tansy lead it off, and then we will move into it from there.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everybody. I want to say peace to the room. Racism in the American on tax policies point of view. Dorothy A. Brown became a tax lawyer to get away from race. As a young girl growing up in the South Bronx, she seen how racism limited the lives of her family and neighbors. Her law school classes offered a refreshing contrast. Tax law was about numbers, and the only color that mattered was green. But when Brown sat down to compare tax returns of her parents, she found something strange. Jane Brown paid an unusually high percentage of their income in taxes. When Brown became a law professor, she set out to understand why. The whiteness of wealth Brown draws on decades of cross-disciplinary research to show the tax law isn't as colorblind as she once believed. She takes on to her adopted city of Atlanta, introducing us to families across the spectrum whose stories demonstrate how American tax law rewards the preferences and practices of white people while pushing Black people further behind. From attending college to getting married to buying a home, Black Americans find themselves at a financial disadvantage compared to their white peers. The results are even increasing wealth gap and more problem will require a wholesome rethinking of America's tax code. But it will also require both white and Black Americans to make different choices. This urgent, actionable book points the way forward. Dorothy A. Brown is an Asa Griggs Chandler Professor at Emory University Law School, a graduate of Fordham University and Georgetown Law School, which now has him in taxation from North from New York University, a nationally recognized scholar in the areas of race, class, and tax policy. She has published dozens of articles, essays, and book chapters on the topic. She has appeared on CNN, MSNBC, PBS, and NPR, and her opinion pieces have been published in CNN Opinion, Forbes, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Born and raised in the South Bronx in New York City, Brown recently lives in Washington, D.C. All right, so thank you, Tansy, for the introduction on Dr. Brown. And again, thank everyone for joining. And we wanted just to bring forth another book, another possible strategy for the freedmen to examine as we move forward in our fight for reparations. I want to begin by just explaining why, which is probably what we just did, explaining why we chose this book. We've been fighting for reparations for a while now, and we've been fighting it through legislation, we've been fighting it through advocacy, specifically for, at the federal level, HR 40, to attempt to change it, fix it, or throw it away and present something better. Such like what the NAASD has done when it comes to the Repair Act and then the new HR 1865. This is another strategy that CAP felt was important to share with the American freedmen to give us another road or another path to get to the road of reparations. One of the things that we constantly do here in CAP is to examine, recognizing that there is a road that leads to reparations, but there are multiple pathways we must take in order to get to the road to the win for reparations. Yeah. And that's why we would like to introduce this book to you guys tonight, The Whiteness of Wealth. What I want to do now is ask Dennis to unmic. He's going to give his interest in the book, what he found that he wasn't aware of, and just what sparked his interest, and hopefully it will spark others here in their interest to examine more the United States tax code and how it affects us as American freedmen, and how it is baked in systemic racism that we may not have ever paid attention to, given that they don't collect data based on race. They don't collect any data on ethnicity, period, when it comes to the tax codes, which should be a major concern to us. So Dennis, can you unmute and just share with the audience what your interest was and what you came across in the book?
I think Dennis might have just dropped out of the StreamYard. Is he in the room on the spaces?
I don't think so. I think the brother's dropped, so.
Yeah, he just disappeared. He might be trying to come back in, reconnecting or something, but he was in here and he just dropped like a second ago.
All right, cool. So, Lawrence, I want to ask you to unmute, and you can give some of the information from the book that you found was interesting, that you thought was of vital importance to share with the audience as we move through the book briefly, to just break it down, help them to better digest something that's really foreign to us, which are the tax codes and how they affect us. So, Marshall, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here with Cap and the Freedmen Party tonight to not only review this book, but really get into the depth of this book. Can you all hear me?
Oh, my bad. That was me. Sorry about that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. Well, as I was saying, I want to thank everybody for checking in tonight with Cap and the Freedmen Party to not only review this book, but to really get into the depth of this book. It's been one of my favorites since I read it a little over a year ago. I saw Dorothy Brown, I believe, on MSNBC one morning before I was getting ready to go to work, and she was explaining, some of the how these tax laws really some of the basic tax or just the joint tax return, and how in many ways it hurts freedmen Americans, married couples who are supposedly doing the right thing, filing joint taxes, trying to get the most out of their tax returns, or having to pay as little as they can for working, an honest job and trying to make an honest wage. And just with how the joint tax return hurts us. I would never think that reading a book, you can always hear conspiracy theories about how taxes are set against Black Americans, freedmen, African Americans, however you say. But to read it in the book and really understand how it was set up and how it didn't work in our favor from a personal level. I think Tansy may have read a little bit in the beginning, but I know that Dorothy Brown's parents, working class, her father was a plumber. My father was an electrician by trade. Her mother went back to school to get better education and became a nurse. My mother was a teacher in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. And it really hit home for me just in the beginning, reading the introduction, because both of the jobs that my parents had were very connected to unions. One of the strongest unions in the country is the teachers union, and one of the stronger, if not the strongest, is electricians and plumbers and their particular unions around the country. And in reading this, it felt like I was reading about my parents fighting against just tax codes that weren't set up in their favor. I know in the beginning of the book, there was one quote she gave during the holidays when her father would be so happy when the holidays came around and going to work on the weekends, or I think like a Sunday and so forth, and he would yell triple time. I know growing up that I heard a lot of that in my home with my parents. If my dad was working out of town, sometimes he wouldn't come home on a weekend. And we would say, Dad, how come you didn't come home? And this weekend, and he would say, son, I'm trying to make triple time. You want a new basketball? You want a new bike? You want this? You want that? Dad's got to go work for it. And in her father picking up triple time money, you would think, wow, just thinking like Dad's gonna make a whole lot of money. But then again, in reading this book and understand that triple time probably hurt my parents more than some of their friends and other family who may have had jobs in the Washington, D.C. area where CAP is located. I mean, it's dominated by the federal government. And in reading this book, I was thinking, with some of the breakdowns of the money that her parents made as opposed to somebody with what they call a good government job, and how some spouses get to stay home. And I'm thinking, wow, the whole time, the tax codes may have been working just as much against my parents, or probably were, than it was somebody who had a good government job whose spouse got to stay home. And so that part really hit me. It kind of devastated me, because I'm thinking, just on being fair, being honest, people go to work as they talk about the horizontal tax rate in the beginning of the book, how if you make more, you should be able to pay more, and it's even across the board. Well, that doesn't work, and we'll get into that as we do reviews further in the book. But those were two portions that really hit me. And so as I got deeper into the book, and other parts will share, just those standouts in the introduction really hit me. And as I've read this book earlier, I've shared it with so many people. I've shared it with members of our organization, Capital Accountability Project. And those were two of the big things that just hit me right off, just in the introduction and parts of the very first chapter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall.
Go for it, Tansy.
I wanted to add something that stuck out to me a lot was how the tax code used our own. So I hear a feedback. Could you guys mute me? I think that might be. Okay, so I noticed that how these tax codes were set up using our own culture of our own family-oriented culture against us. As a single person, that's not married and has children, that's the one thing that a lot of people will tell us, you know, you get married, you take advantage, the legal advantage of taxes. You know, that's the whole point of marriage. It gives you a benefit in that way. And it only works in that way if you have an abundance of money. It doesn't work that way if you're just a regular everyday person. So I thought that was kind of interesting, as like they said in the beginning, how her parents were both workers, you know, and had professional jobs, and they both of them were paying just as much, if not more, than what she was making, you know, and as she goes deeper into that in the book. But I just saw that as being interesting, how it's our own culture that has been used as a way to extract funds and resources away from us. And it's not just like that in the Freedmen community. If you look at large of low income, it's like that. But in our community specifically, we're speaking. And so I wanted to bring that point out.
Definitely.
Thank you, Tazzy. So when we look at the book, and as we travel through it, people may be still thinking, okay, so what is the point? The point is how our tax codes, the IRS tax codes, affect disproportionately freedmen, and how they too are implicit in the oppression of the freedmen and our ability to garner wealth here in this country. Throughout the book, what you found that she reiterated was how, again, as Mark McClellan has spoken about, was how we are disproportionately affected by filing joint. When we thought the joint was a better filing for us because we were married, we would get a higher, we would get higher deductions, which essentially translates to a lower tax liability. That doesn't typically happen within our community because of the way the tax laws are set up. Another way that we are disproportionately affected is because when the tax codes were originally set up, way back prior to when we went to war, so I think it was the Revenue Act of 1913, where before we went to war, only the rich paid taxes. Only the rich paid taxes. The poor did not pay taxes. But because of the war, as you'll find in this book, America needed revenue. And so they passed the tax law, the Revenue Act of 1913, I believe, that then made all of us pay taxes. Now, initially, when they passed it, it wasn't that bad because there was basically a flat tax rate. Since then, because corporations have now taken control over the United States and our tax codes and so forth, we have now basically things have been flipped, right? The citizens pay, the everyday citizen pays the taxes, and the corporations and the rich do not. So 10% of the United States, which are the richest, do not pay taxes, and corporations do not pay taxes for the most part, or they pay at a lower rate than the everyday citizen. We all know that we are taxed on our gross, not our net. Mm-hmm. Businesses are taxed on their net, not their gross. So they get to spend, and then I spend everything down to zero. It is a balance saying, I have no taxable income. Imagine if we could do the same thing. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't get that opportunity. So that's another point that the book brought out. The other things were things that for the everyday person, they may not understand, like how we are taxed at a higher rate on our earnings or our labor versus the capital gains. So for us, we pay anywhere from 10 to 18% taxes, depending on what state you live in, on your wages. But capital gains tax is significantly lower. And in some cases, they can pay 3 to 5%, if that much, on capital gains. So they can gain $1 million, and they only pay 3 to 5%. Whereas that might sound like a lot, but it really isn't. When you're also thinking of the fact that they get to write off their losses. We don't get to write off our losses. when we look at the tax code, it disproportionately affects us. And with reading the book, we then had to ask ourselves, okay, if we know that we are disproportionately affected, and if we know that the IRS is purposely avoiding putting out data or disaggregating data so that it reflects race or ethnicity, then what can we do? What are some of the solutions that we can look at in order to begin to address these issues? And how does this help us in our fight? We have, and if I forget one of the solutions, one of the CAP members, I need you all to jump in for me. We have 6 solutions that we're proposing that we begin to look at a state level as well as at a federal level. But most of us who are not at the federal level in our advocacy, most of us are at our local, which are our counties, our cities, and then our state. These same strategies, these same tools will apply. And so,
Yeah, Dennis is back.
Okay. So we're going to first read the solutions, and then we will go more in depth about each one, and we will answer any questions that are coming from the audience. So the first solution is to establish a tax credit for American freedmen. That essentially this tax credit would be an income subtraction from our income for the taxes we paid, beginning from when Plessy versus Ferguson was established to when the Jim Crow era ended. The calculation for that would be $43,209 just for that specific era, that specific time. That would be our first solution. And that, if you do have the book, you can reference page 200 of the book to see the full calculation on it. I don't want to get too technical, but you can see the calculation on it. And you can also reference an article that was written by L.G. Sherrod. And the article the name of it is 40 Acres in a Mule. She, in that article, she references the $43,209 and why she feels that would be the first step in one of our solutions to when it comes to reparative justice here. Also, we're going to go a little bit deeper about that. The same thing has already been given or is already being considered under Senate Bill 1940. It's called the Refund Equity Act, but it's not for us, it's for the LGBTQ community. Just to put a pin in that. Our second solution would be to publish tax data by race. Just as the IRS is able to disaggregate data right now by gender and age, they can also disaggregate data by race. Now, we know what the Supreme Court's ruling is on race. We understand all that. But as it relates to collection of data, the Supreme Court has no ruling on that. Most states and federal agencies do collect data based on race. That's why we have the census. Okay? So that's not something that we are asking for that is impossible to happen. It's already being done. And to add to that, the Social Security Administration, where the IRS gathers their information from, already collects data on race. The IRS simply chooses not to collect that data for tax purposes, and that's for a reason. Because then the American people would see how the tax codes disproportionately affect one specific group, and then we would really have a real argument as it relates to reparative justice or reparations when it comes to the federal government. Dennis, are you here yet?
Yeah, Dennis is back.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Dennis.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Dennis.
Fantastic. First, I want to thank Eric for setting up the room and thank the Freedom Party for inviting us. On the third solution, it would be return to the progressive tax format, no exclusion and no deductions, and a progressive tax rate. On the fourth solution, we would mandate to aggregate the data from corporations to see well, since we are, as freedmen, the largest consumers, we want to see who, which consumers, which corporations we would contribute to even more so. In those specific corporations, we can pretty much put out the information as pushing out to uh, the rest of the freedmen.
Mm-hmm.
And so just
You know what I'm saying? I'll come back to chapter 1, which I wanted to touch base on. I'll let Tansy finish giving the other 2 solutions that we have.
Thanks, Dennis. So just to piggyback on what Dennis is saying, of course, for number 3, to refer to a progressive income system where there's no exclusions, but we have a single deduction, and no reduced or preferential rates. I know, again, that might be something that's over the everyday person's head who doesn't prepare taxes or is not really engaged. They just do the H&R blocks and all the other tax programs that are out here. What that essentially means is that we go back to pre-taxation when the richest and the corporations were being taxed. The progressive scale means that you will be taxed based on your progressive income when it comes to your state guidelines of what the poverty level looks like. You will be taxed at a different rate. Essentially, we would create 3 different tax brackets, and the more money you would make, then the more you would have to pay. But if you made, let's say, less than $50,000, you would not be taxed at all. So that's what we mean when we talk about the progressive system. The other one was the preferential rates. The preferential rates are pertaining to, again, when it comes to how we are being taxed at a wage level versus how capital gains are being taxed. Those are preferential rates. They're at lower rates. Again, when we say no deductions, right now, when you think about the rich, or you think about upper echelon people who have more income, we understand that for the most part, prior to 2017, when the tax codes were changed and the IRS increased their standard deduction, almost 80%, 80 to 85% of American freedmen always took standard. Most of us didn't qualify to really access those upper income deductions. Therefore, we never benefited from it. So what we're saying is those deductions have to be removed from the rich, from the upper income period, so that there's a standard tax rate across the board. Like right now, what you find is because of the 2017 tax changes, 90% of Americans now take standard, which means 90% of us now pay an equal amount of taxes because we're not able to write off everything because they have more income, so they can write off more expenses. We no longer are agreeing to have that done. That's what we meant by that. And then Dennis talked about the mandate to disaggregate data for corporations. Basically, what we're saying is within the corporations and within the colleges, we want to see the entire black workforce. We want to know how many are in upper management, how many of the American freedmen are there, and what are their pay rates. Right? We want this data to become available to the public. Why? Because we know that we are large consumers. Education, knowledge is power. So us knowing what corporations, what companies are really investing in us, really paying us an equal share as they're paying our counterparts' rights, and at this point, other ethnicities. And how many of us are in upper management positions should matter to us when it comes to how we spend our money. If we want to gain economic power, we have to know what companies are really serious about moving forward when it comes to the racial wealth gap and closing it, and which companies are putting on the face because they can afford to pay for a whole lot of advertisements, but behind the scenes, they are doing nothing except keeping us down. So that was 3 and 4. I'm going to ask Tansy to come over to cover 5 and 6.
Okay, great.
Okay. So another option that we can have is we can go back to the original tax system. And I'll let Assad elaborate on that, being that she is a tax professional. So I think that we just went over going back to the original tax system. I think we're going to pick up with when people are thinking, okay, if you all are asking for all deductions to be removed, how does that benefit us with the little bit that we get, like our student loan deduction, we get up to $2,500 and blah, blah, blah. So number 5 would be in lieu of the tax deductions that we have, we'll be again asking for the greatest portion of the taxes to be paid by the wealthy. So that we will go back to the original system where you did not pay taxes at all. You would have to be a part of the 10% of the Americans at that time who were considered the rich. They would pay the taxes on behalf of all of us. So that was, and that again, I know this might sound far-fetched, you might not understand it all, but if you have the book, you can go to page 207. This is paragraph 4, where it'll break down more for you. So yeah, that was that one. And I think we had one, Tansy. Yeah, it was renters tax credit for freedmen. Now that one is a good one, and some of that is already being done now. I know in the state of Maryland, we have a renters tax credit. The thing is, most of us don't know that we have. Other states have it. I think I know that Minnesota has it, and I can't remember the other states offhand. But because freedmen have historically been locked down and becoming homeowners, we can't benefit from writing law mortgage interest. Again, which is a deduction that's given to the whites. Another transfer of wealth as well. So what we're now saying is, because we have been forced into paying rent, we want a renter's tax credit. We want to be able to write off some of our rent, rather that's 10%, 20%, 30%, that can still be discussed. But the fact of the matter is, we want a renter's credit. Now, again, your state, if you check your state codes, your state tax codes, you may find it's already on the books, but it's not on your state income tax return. For the most part, you normally have to apply for it separately. I know here in the state of Maryland, you have to apply for it separately, and it is a refundable credit. So we're not just asking for a deduction off of our tax liability, we're asking for a refundable credit for the rent that we've paid. Right now, the target is 20% of what your rent is to be a refundable tax credit. So that's what, and we're encouraging everyone to look into your state codes. And if you're not sure where to look, contact your state department of tax assessors, because whoever assesses your taxes for your state will know if there's a renter's credit already there, and if it is, you should apply for it. Most of the time, you get a second check in the mail because it is a refundable credit. These are immediate things that can happen. For the most part, this might sound like we're proposing a whole lot that's unrealistic, but the truth of the matter is, it's not unrealistic. Biden can sign an executive order and make this happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, just as he did when it came to the COVID-19 emergency money, the Build Back Better plan, just as he's doing for the Ukrainians. These things can happen overnight if we are aware of it. And that's the thing. We stay focused on certain parts of our fight and we miss other parts. There are multiple pathways that must be taken in order for us to win the fight for reparations. These pathways begin to fund us now and sustain us financially as we're continuing our fight. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it to the audience.
Thank you for that, Asan.
You're welcome.
Tansy, you got your hand up.
Yes, Asan. So for our audience, that they just digested all of this information. For the individual organizations at the local level, who exactly would be the elected official that we would address all of these tax proposals and tax options to? So initially, I would recommend that you reach out to your comptroller. I don't know if you are in every state, if it's called the comptroller or if it's called your state treasurer. We have a state treasurer and a comptroller. The comptroller is the elected official. The state treasurer is not. So you have to know the dynamics of your specific location to know who to reach out to begin this process. And if you don't know, then I would recommend that you start with your state representative. The state representative will be that key. For most states, they have what they call constituent services. If you reach out to the constituent services number for your state rep, they actually do get back to you. And you can begin the process of finding out who do I reach out to. Once you get the book, digest it. Again, also, Ms. Brown, she is approachable. She does respond to your inquiries, and that is a good thing. She is somewhat middle of the road when it comes to advocating specifically for us, although she is one of us. She believes that the way to the win also is through American citizenship and arguing for the Americans as a group. But to say that is to say that she is accessible if you have further questions about how can you employ some of these strategies from her book in your local states.
Definitely. Before we hop into the audience, I'll just share my notes really quickly and then just take any questions. If anyone wants to come up, get ready. We'll start looking at hands. But just on the notes from this conversation, then I'll get on the notes from this book. You mentioned, Asan, about taxing only basically the rich and getting rid of the taxes for everyone else. One of the things I looked at when I was kind of doing an analysis of like wealth in the United States, I learned that there's only around 500 billionaires in America. There's only around 10 million millionaires, and there's 330 million people in the United States. So there's 320 million people that have less than $1 million, right? And so if you look at percentages, 1% would be like around less than 1%, like the 500. 9% is around the 10 million, and then basically 90% of the country, 320 million, wouldn't pay taxes. You would only tax the millionaires and billionaires to provide the services. The other thing you mentioned is about the speed at which we can do this, and that it can be done in an executive order in a day, essentially. And it's true, the third branch of government, the executive branch, has the Treasury Department, and like you mentioned, is over the IRS. So this is completely within the wheelhouse without any congressional approval. In terms of my notes, Whiteness of Wealth, I thought of a few books it's related to. First is The Black Tax by Sean Rochester. The other is Black Labor, White Wealth by Claude Anderson. And then obviously From Here to Equality by Dr. Darity and Kirsten Mullen. Now I'll just try to run through the notes as quickly as possible. So the part about the tax code I think is super important, that the fact that even how Marshall gave an anecdote about his own family with the overtime, and basically needing to work multiple jobs, get multiple pay, and then still not being able to reap all the benefits of the work that was put in, right? Because of the tax system. Um, Professor Brown talks about um, basically how the tax system is structured. That black families traditionally and married couples with two incomes will pay more in taxes than two married white people because they usually have uh, a man that works and then a woman whose labor at home is not taxed because she doesn't work. And I found that like just a crazy statistic and reality because it's counterintuitive to how we would think about this, right? Um, this was also touched upon the fact that um, she talks about college debt and the fact that we usually self finance our debt. And because of that, 60% of us don't finish college. I remember when I was like a prospective college student, I went on this HBCU kind of like, it was almost like a boot camp. Like they trained us on like what questions to ask for prospective colleges and, you know, when we meet with admissions people. And one of the questions they taught us was, what is the black graduation rate? Because they always like to talk about their overall graduation rate. But they were already thinking about delineation to some respect when they were thinking, well, what is the black graduation rate? And the black graduation rate was almost always less than the overall graduation rate, and it's shown in her statistic of 60%, right? And then we often graduate with higher debts than whites because they're able to finance with their wealth that they accumulated from slavery. Meanwhile, we were never given our 40 acres and a meal um, or the money back from the Freedmen's Bank robbery. Um, Also, she talks about the Treasury Department not doing anything yet, even though she said she likes the Biden executive order on racial equity. I definitely agree with her analysis that we need to have the IRS publish data based on race and uh, status in terms of even delineating freedmen from African immigrants. Um, and then she also mentions home appraisals, right? So we're also taxed in home appraisals in the sense that uh, the value of our homes, even you can swap it with a white family, replace the photos with white families, and it'll be almost double the appraisal. And that's another form of taxation um, that we experience. Um, the last kind of things in terms of solutions that uh, I like that um, she mentions this idea of like obviously the wealth tax, which she talks about from her legal perspective, could potentially get around any constitutionality challenges. But one she mentions in this interview is a reparations tax credit, um, and she likes the idea, but she just doesn't think it'll be kind of like feasible legislatively. Um, and then she also mentions the equal wages audit and tax wage deduction, and I like that. Basically, auditing companies to make sure they're paying equal wages across race and lineage, and then if they aren't, then to deduct uh, any wage tax uh, kind of credits and things like that. So those are kind of my notes, but everyone else added like really great stuff as well.
Also, it would be definitely advantageous to us if we were able to have the audit system set up when it comes to the corporations. She's absolutely right. And when it comes to the reparations, she wasn't strongly comfortable with it because again, she was basing it on race, and her position was that we all know at this point is that the Supreme Court is not going to rule on anything in our favor as it relates to race, that it will be challenged. And so again, if we go back to looking at what S. Bill 1940, the Refund Equity Act, that act is essentially a reparations bill for the LGBTQ, but it's not saying any type of nationality. It's specific to a specific group. So the reparations tax credit that she's referring to would have to be framed the same way. Mm-hmm. It cannot be framed based on race. It has to be framed, as we already know, based on lineage and the impact that the IRS has had on us by the mere fact that we have been paying taxes, especially when it comes to the Plessy versus Ferguson, all the way up to the Jim Crow era, which is the part that she was referring to, where we were paying taxes and we were not getting the benefit of paying the tax, although we were paying the equal amount of tax of the white. And so that's what she meant. I understood that she kind of moved away from it. I just wanted to clarify that so that people didn't get discouraged thinking it's not available to us. No, it's available to us. We may be a little more advanced in the lineage fight versus the race fight than what she is at that time. Mm-hmm. So I think Dennis initially wanted to finish what he was saying, and then we will go to the art.
Okay, thanks, Ashan. I wanted to talk about chapter 1. That's one of the chapters that really hit home with me, even though I did know that, obviously, that most single wage earners are that's married are white. And because of that, they get the biggest benefit as far as paying less taxes on their joint returns. It's a fact that Black households are pretty much 50-50, meaning the mother and the father both work and pay higher taxes. With that, we are disadvantaged. There was a study performed between 1984 and 2009. So getting married whites increased their wealth holdings of 75,635. But for us, it was as far as for freedmen, it was a no significant effect to our wealth. Even by the standards, if we even go into it today, the 2017 Jobs and Tax Cut Bill, and even though it eliminated the marriage penalty, but for us freedmen, we still got the marriage penalty, but we weren't eligible for the tax cut of that marriage penalty. And for one of my last points, specifically for freedmen, men and women, say, for example, you make $50,000 or more working, you will pay higher taxes than a married couple making $50,000 combined at a 22% tax rate, while the couple will pay a 12% tax rate. So let's tie that into immigration. 47% of Blacks are single compared to 27% of Hispanics that are single. So that means they're paying a less tax rate. Legal and illegal immigrants are paying a less tax rate. And that kind of ties in also to the gentrification in the main Black cities, which are being gentrified, which here I live in Washington, D.C. And the white couples, they're pretty much living on one household salary, and they're benefacted paying less taxes than us Blacks, which me and my wife found out last year.
Brother Dennis.
Taxes.
Brother Dennis.
You there, Dennis?
Yeah. If you could hear me, I think you're muted. You were having some difficulty with that. You're going to have to go back through your synopsis a little bit because you were muted on one end. I can hear you fine through StreamYard, but the Twitter space is probably having some difficulty getting that. So I hate to ask you to repeat what you said, but you were making some great points, and we'd like to hear it again. Can you just speak?
Can you hear me on Twitter?
Now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
So I hate to ask you to repeat, brother, but you were making some great points. If you could, just for the sake of Twitter space, just after the first 10% of what you said, could you pick that up again, please? I hate to make you do it, but you were cut off on one end.
Oh, no problem, Marshall. I was expounding on chapter 1, Married While Black. It really hit home with me because
absolutely
me and my wife filed jointly for the first time last year. And we found out that when I filed single, I made a lot more. She made a lot more. And we thought filing jointly, we would benefit more, but we found out that wasn't the case. So when...
Oh, we lost Dennis again.
I think he's having some issues with his got to be with the Wi-Fi at home, and I'll reach out to him while
we'll get it working.
Yeah, we try to come back. I'm gonna mute myself and see if I can get back with Dennis.
Yeah,
but while we have an opportunity here, for anyone that's in the room, we'd love to hear from some of the anybody who's married who may have read this book and saw some of the scenarios in the book hitting close to home in your life with marriage. And I don't mean that while we're trying to get Dennis back in, that Married While Black chapter, man, that's a hard pill to swallow, especially those of us, in society, we're always told and demonized as freedmen. You all need to get married. You all need to, and for those who, want to take on a spouse and those responsibilities of marriage, we feel as though that it is the best thing. Disclaimer, I am not married, but, and I'd love to hear from the audience, some of the hard questions for us single folks and those who are married to, in reading this chapter. Are there some different things some different conversations you would have had with your spouse if you knew some of the things in this book that came to light? As Dennis said, our brother Dennis said, he and his wife were paying less as getting more tax benefits as singles than they were as a married couple. I know that probably shocked him, but that would be a great thing to share. You don't have to get too deep or personal if you don't want to, but anyone who has experiences, paying taxes as a married couple and what they found out and what they've seen, we'd love to hear that, because in that chapter, if I yeah, absolutely. Just waiting to get Dennis back in. I thought I'd fill up some space, but yeah, please.
Thank you. Go for it, the art.
Okay. I didn't have that plan to answer, so I'm just going to tell you guys what I was going to say. There's 299 state executive positions statewide that are nonpartisan. Might be something that you guys want to look up to. Especially, I know there's 12 elected states. Those areas, 5 of them are predominantly black. So there's definitely some voting power there. Another thing I wanted to ask is anyone familiar with the U.S. Code Chapter 4? Is U.S. Code 8, Chapter 4?
No, what does that refer to?
I can put all this stuff in the Jumbotron just to save a little bit of time.
Yeah, definitely. Talk it out. At least give a brief overview, but definitely put it in the Jumbotron.
It's just the U.S. Code that identifies people. So then, if you file your request, you use Freedmen as opposed to race or color or anything. So I know you guys were talking about the LGBTQ or whatever. So I was wondering if this could replace that situation. So when we were referencing the LGBTQ, we were referencing a current Senate bill that was introduced in 2019, then that was reintroduced, I believe. in 2000. They are essentially requesting for reparations through the IRS. The bill is the Refund Equity Act. And so that's what we were referencing. And we were using that as a reference point to say that if they are able to introduce a bill such like that for them, and they were able to identify these potential people who were harmed by the IRS codes of not allowing them to be recognized as joint married filers, then they certainly have the ability to disaggregate the data. How were they able to even identify these people? Because a lot of this was done prior to this was done prior to the United States making a law that recognized same-sex marriages. What we found was they went so far as to go out into the actual communities of these people to let them know about this potential action that was taking place. And so if you go back to the book of how there are different ways that the IRS could also identify us. They're not infallible, but yet they can still be used. That's like zip codes. We know historically, we know that the Census Bureau has information as to where the largest concentrations of us are. If you do local work, just like in CAP, we've identified specific counties, that we have 7 specific counties in our state. We have 7, those 7 specific counties have a percentage of American. Then we narrowed it down to our cities. Therefore, we're able to do that. The IRS is able to do that, and then collect that data, and then target and assume that the majority of those people would have to be descendants. Those are just some of the ways, the same way that they did their due diligence to identify the LGBTQ and who would be eligible for this Refund Equity Act. They can do the same for American Freedmen if they wanted to. Because we're now going to start acting on it.
Okay,
so you seen the Jumbotron, I'm assuming? We can use that?
So I haven't reviewed it. You have to give me a second to look at it. But if it is what they say it is, then it's certainly no worthy of us to look into it and see how we can make use of it. Absolutely.
That, so that's why I brought up. I wanted to bring up also open education. Is that okay?
Say that again.
Are you there?
I think he muted himself.
Yeah, he muted himself.
Yeah. Okay. It's, open education is different than paintball or public education. A lot of people get to set the curriculum, and it might not be something you agree with. You might still want to send your kid to school, but I feel like open education would be a good supplement for that. And it's like, it's free, you know what I'm saying? And if you can touch up on your algebra and have like a teacher at home, so to speak, and you can pick your teacher of choice as opposed to, having the school elect one, if you get what I'm saying. And all the education that's put on there is also open author, so teachers can teach classes on their time as well. I hope that makes sense.
I guess I was a little thrown off because right now we're discussing, just so we can reset the room. We're discussing the book, The Whiteness of Wealth by Dorothy Brown. We're discussing the IRS tax codes and how it disproportionately affects the American freedmen. And we're discussing solutions that we can employ at our local and our state levels as well as our federal level. And just key points from the book from anyone who was able to how you're trying to tie that into what we're discussing right now. Now, we can certainly discuss when we talk about how real estate tax affects our school system, because we know that our property taxes pay our school system. Now, again, and that's separate but equal, that Plessy versus Ferguson issue, and you can correlate it to that if that's what you're trying to reference. Otherwise, I don't see how what you're discussing is playing into the conversation that we're having for the room right now.
I just posted a joke short about the 299 state executive positions that statewide they're not person. But outside of that, I'll just lay my plane.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So just before we call on some other speakers, and I see the rep perspectives here. Again, when we look at our real estate property taxes and how we know that our property is always assessed at a lower value, which then translates to our school systems being underpaid when it's actually underfunded when it comes to our taxes getting to our school system to educate our children. Again, these are systemic implicit biases into our system that does not show specifically race, because they don't track race as far as the IRS. But we know that it was written specifically to affect us when it came to the integration of schools. It was another way of them ensuring that we did not receive the education that they felt we weren't supposed to have. Again, tax code is what we're talking about tonight. How do we examine the tax code?
Thank you, Hassan and the Freedmen Party and all of the tribe, all the comrades in the space. I'm just, I haven't listened to the book in its entirety. Right? But what I am noticing is that to limit it to the 14 trillion that I hear being thrown about on a consistent basis is really, this book is how we need to understand in a major way how much of a fire sale it is. When I talk about reparations, it's not just being for slavery, but also Jim Crow and a crude ongoing systemic racism oppression and disadvantage. This is what I'm talking about. There are all these different layers. My God, all these different layers to how all these injuries that have been leveled at us to keep us tethered to the bottom of the anchor of the country's capitalism. It's horrific in every way. And it frustrates and angers me. So I guess my question is, can we just go through all of the ways in which we've been taxed without representation and still the federal government as American freedmen, as a lineage? Because I'm just losing confidence in the Fed ever delivering on reparations. So how do we capitalize, right now and make them pay right now? I don't know that that's been discussed. Like I said, I'm only on chapter 3. Started listening to it today, but I don't want to disclose those here because I think you're working with things close to your vest, but that's what it seems to me like we got to just start doing at one speed, because the great replacement is here. And it's going to only get worse. I heard her mention some of the disparities amongst the other groups, and it's like she said, I'm not really focused on that. Y'all can have that. But when you think about ancestors having so highly, highly offensive to me, as I'm sure it is you guys as well, that we're and they're just coming up with ways to work with lobbyists, these big corporations are working with these lobbyists to keep us on track. And so how do you get out from under this? How do you get off the bottom? You know, how do you do this when you've been neutralized economically and now they're seeking to replace that look like you but don't represent you. They're representing immigrants and the LGBTQIA. I'll land there. I'm just at a crossroads as to how to fix this. I don't know because everybody in government and every branch is involved in this fuckery. I'll land there. Thank you.
So, if you want to jump in first.
I'll add in the sense of all these layers that you talked about, that all those layers add up to genocide, and particularly, and on the tax side, these are limiting our benefits, right? You get tax credits, you get tax deductions, all these ways in which you get paid by the government for, basically being an honest citizen. And when I think about not just the benefit side, but the cost side, all of the problems we're talking about amount to genocide, and obviously reparations is the solution. And we can include, like you mentioned, you said Jim Crow and other things like the GI Bill, and even what Professor Brown is talking about in terms of all of the taxes that we've been overpaying in all these years. That can be calculated into our reparations claim. And there's no statute of limitations on genocide. There's United Nations and United States laws for genocide that we can look at. But to solutions, we still would have to change the tax code as well, in addition to going after reparations.
Exactly. I would agree with that. And I would go further to say, again, we have to recognize, as you said, Angela, that there is so much that is stacked up against us. Some of this stuff isn't new. It's new to us because we are now more informed than we've ever been in our past. One, the internet gives us wealth of information and allows us to research and study things deeper. But one of the key things that we have to remember is that I don't personally believe that there's going to be one road to reparations. There's going to be multiple layers and multiple paths that we take to achieve the ultimate goal of full reparations. So for immediate relief, some of the 6 points that we mentioned would bring us some financial relief. It's not reparations, it's what we call reparative justice. Because reparations will come from the federal government through a specific program that's reparations. But in the interim, while we're trying to get the full reparative justice that we are due, which is reparations, we have to recognize that there are other things that we can still access right now to begin to make the road easier for us. And so attacking the tax code, again, something that has been buried from us, something that most of us may tend to stray from because taxes seems to be a very intimidating and scary thing to address, is now upon us. Now we have resources and we have books and we have articles to better understand that makes it a lot easier for us to digest. And so when we do uncover something, it behooves us as American freedmen who are fighting for reparations for us to share it with our entire group. Because we don't know who we're talking to, who may come up with a better strategy, another solution to how we can get immediate relief. I believe that immediate relief can come through executive orders when it comes to the tax code, because the president has the ability to do that when it comes to the IRS. He can make this happen, as we discussed earlier tonight, in a blink of an eye, if he wanted to. We are in a midterm election. We have to know what can be done and where to apply the pressure to facilitate and force that change. That's why the education is important. We can't get discouraged in thinking that reparations is fading away from us. We should be encouraged that we are learning more and more about the other devices that have been hidden from us. that we are now going to add to. Now we're creating a whole new path to get us to the reparations quicker and hopefully a lot easier, because we can now start getting tangible now through the IRS. All right.
I just want to add on a little bit to the reparations on what you said. I added the C-SPAN video that I think everybody should watch. It's about a 12-minute video, and it's about opening arguments that Deidre Farman Perlman, she was the lead plaintiff on the case, and she went after J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, and like 18 other defendants. It's just something so you know what they're going to push back with. So I think that can help everybody involved, no matter who you are. And I forgot the second point I had, so if I can put my hand back up when I remember, that'd be cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. And yeah, litigation is another approach. It's not going to be the be-all, right? Nor is legislation and policy going to be the be-all as we're traveling the road to reparations. All of those things have to be in combination, right? We have to understand that there are certain parts that we can litigate and bring about some immediate relief and change, and then other things are going to require legislation. Other things are going to require more time of advocating, more time of becoming more politically in the know, if you will, so that we know who to go to, who to apply the pressure to, recognizing where we are in the stream of time when it comes to the midterm elections, knowing who to go to, who can you impact now? We know that the Democrats are the underdogs right now, and they're starting to gain more steam, or so they say. But at this point, both parties are fighting for this midterm election. It's an opportune time for us, now that we are now armed with new information. It's an opportune time for us to now input and push these people who are running to ask them, would you be willing to push for an executive order for the IRS tax codes to change, and for us to have some of the things that we've listed here from our list of our 6, or some of the things that you may find in the book, the Whiteness of Wealth. And so those are the ways that we bring about the change. That's the way that I see that we can bring about the change, recognizing everything is layered up against us. So we already know this. Now, how do we deal with those layers and create multiple pathways so that we can all get on the same road to reparations?
Yes, exactly. Great points. Let's go to CJ Willis and then Marshall. What are your thoughts or questions you got, CJ?
Thank you to thanks for holding the space, and thank you to CAP and representatives. I actually was looking at the I had a question, and I also saw something when I was looking for some of the information you were referencing. The first question was about the $43,209. Was when she was LG Sarad, when they brought that up, were they talking about per? Was that like supposed to be per individual freedman, or per family, or what was it that about?
It was supposed to be per individual freedman.
Okay. So I tried to look for that article, but I couldn't find it. But I did find articles talking about it. And in one of the articles, or actually in both of the articles, there's a quote from one of the tax representatives, because people were trying to apply for this on their taxes. And in the article, the representative, his name is Frank Keefe, he states that there clearly is no statutory authority for honoring these claims. So I thought it was interesting that what you were talking about with as far as that they have built this in to the tax code for the LGBTQ group. But when it came to us, they were saying it's not built in statutorily. So I found that interesting. I was wondering if you could speak on that a little bit.
So at the time that strategy was employed, there was no that what he's saying is absolutely correct. There was a father and a daughter who the father prepared the daughter's return. She put the tax credit on it. She essentially received a refund for $500,000. And then later, she and her father were prosecuted and actually sent to jail for, I think the daughter was sent for 3 years to jail. The father was also sentenced to 3 years, but then his got reduced. And the reason why is because they were found guilty of filing a fraudulent return because the credit did not exist. Henceforth is why, again, we are saying that executive orders would cure that. If it's not on the books, you can't file for a credit currently that is not on the books, that's not recognized by the IRS as an actual credit. You can't say, well, I had a theory of it, so I put it on there and you all gave it to me. It doesn't work that way. So that's what he meant when he said that it wasn't recognized. But as you just said about the LGBTQ, theirs was not on the books either. But once Senate Bill 1940 was created, it began the road of getting it to the books, right? And that's where we have to learn. Okay, what do they have in theirs? Because theirs is certainly not based on race. So what do they have in theirs that we can sit down, we can extract, and that we can create, and that then we can lobby and we can advocate for, and we can push our elected officials to now push a bill for us that's in the likeness of that or more. That's how we, again, achieve what we're trying to achieve. So the next time it happens, it will be on the books.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Marshall, did you want to ask a question or a comment?
Well, I didn't necessarily want to ask a question. It's just that tonight, what we're understanding and why this book is so important is because we're getting into the meat and potatoes of tax laws that hurt us. You hear the old phrase that, for instance, anybody that was applying to college and having to take either the ACT or the SAT, some of the elders will always tell you that the English portion of the SAT or the ACT is biased against us, but the math portion is clear. As long as you understand the math and get a high score on the math part, you can basically get into most colleges that you want. When it comes to taxes, Dorothy Brown set this book off right when she said, I got into tax law because I was getting away from race. And so what we're talking about tonight is strictly policy. So we're digging into how policies have hurt us. We have to take this book, flip it inside out, and say these same policies, we have to work it so that they work for us, even if we have to work towards extracting some of the policy that is probably more than beneficial to the rich. It's how they became rich. We have to turn it and how it has to work for us. So this has to be just another building block to our advocacy, and not only for reparations, because let's understand, y'all, when, I'm not going to say if, but when we do receive, pure reparations, proper reparations, you have to understand that there's going to be legislation that's going to try to gut us tax-wise. So some of these same policies are going to work negatively in our favor if we don't do what we're supposed to do, and not only work on that end to get reparation, but to make sure that the tax laws will be beneficial to us. Some people will say, I've heard some people say, well, what's the use of getting all this money and getting all these resources if the government is going to tax us to death? Well, we really can't take advantage of it. And we've gone through some solutions tonight, as Tansy, Dennis, and Assange have broken down in the past. But I want people to understand that we're just not doing this book tonight just for a good read or something more interesting to add to our bookshelves and so forth. We have to understand how tax law is working against us and how we can flip it and reverse it in our favor. So I want people to definitely understand that. And just through the way Dorothy Brown wrote this book in the areas of home ownership, college education, just the way just our employment and so forth, and how none of it, unfortunately, is working for us. to our betterment. You got a lot of brothers and sisters walking around with tons of degrees, tons of education, but it's just not working for them. And how we sit on the fact that we have these great jobs and all this great education that should be beneficial to us, but behind this tax policy and these laws, it's not working for us. So all I wanted to say is that I hope that people just don't listen tonight to a good conversation and say, oh, that was interesting what they were talking about. This is very heady stuff, but we have to use what we have. And I would love to have everyone check some of the sources that Dorothy Brown uses in the book about other articles. As much as she's given us tonight, there are a lot of articles, whether it's in the book, and of course you have the notes. If you have Kindle or other sources to download the book itself, there are hyperlinks to other articles that would be definitely beneficial to us. So I'm not going to get deeper into it because I want other questions, and hopefully we can answer some other things tonight. But that's all I want to say for right now.
Definitely. Just to add to what you said about employment, she makes an interesting connection between our unemployment rate, which is a function of our genocide, apartheid, and employment, and how that causes the need to have a two-income household, right?
Yeah.
And then connecting that to obviously our lack of wealth from our ancestry of slavery and not ever being repaired, right? So yeah, it's completely connected. Tansy, you have your hand up. Go for it.
If you guys will look into the Jumbotron, there I placed a video with Dorothy Brown explaining the book, and she just kind of breaks it down into plain language. And these are the things that kind of grabbed me when I first got the book and I started following her to learn more about this. So it seems heady and taxes aren't the thing. And she breaks it down and makes it really, really plain.
Yeah, no, she's a great writer and a great speaker in terms of her interviews as well. Art, I know you wanted to ask another question. Go for it, and then we'll go to Inspired.
I just wanted to address that. I think something that people don't look at with reparations, even though it's a form of cash relief, is the fact that poverty is the biggest killer of Americans. But obviously disproportionately hurts particularly freedmen. When I say that, I also gave 3 sources. You can click any of the. I'm not going to add the link because you can just click any of the links in the Jumbotron that I posted, and it's on the same thread. But yeah, there's 3 sources there, and then another thing I posted was food, mutual aid. There's also mutual aid disaster relief, and there's also a mutual aid legal kit. And the reason why I try to push mutual aid is because it gives you leverage. Well, now you can go on strike or you can boycott. And I'll end with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Your turn, Inspired. You there? I love clarity. Can you hear us? If not, does anybody else on stage have a question or comment? Or anyone in the audience want to come up and ask one?
Don't be afraid, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, get in here. Y'all are in here on a Friday night, and you all are taking the time to be with us. So if you have a question, there are no foolish or stupid questions. And ask the speakers anything. Come on in.
Yep. You there, Inspired?
Hi, hello, family.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to multitask.
No, it's okay.
But I was trying to get back to the space. Great conversation. When I first heard about the book, we had a meeting. I went and downloaded it and was amazed. I had to speak with you guys on the back channel, what I actually do for a living. But to see that on a day-to-day basis in reference to why the wealth gap seems to keep enlarging, and it's the mindset. And we definitely have to, I'm great that there's some, even I'm curious as to why she kind of changed her viewpoint, but I am grateful that there was a look at the actual tax code and why our gap keeps growing and why we're not catching up, and it has to be related to the tax codes and the laws that are written that way. I am curious to know as to, since the data isn't collected, I know it's collected, but since the data isn't based on race, isn't shared publicly, is there a way that we can petition to, will we go to the comptrollers and those type of avenues and whoever's handling that in our areas to actually see if we can try to get that data released?
So the data may be, when it comes to the federal level data, that's a whole different story of how we can get that disaggregated. When it comes to your state level, as we all know, most of our states do not disaggregate the data as it pertains to Blackness, and certainly not American Freedmen, right? That's another one of the issues that we have to now deal with. Again, as we become more knowledgeable about things, we have to figure out the pathway to deal with it. So in your local states, you can certainly go to, again, if you have a comptroller, which is typically the one that is elected by the people of the state. Then you have the state treasurer. And then again, you always have your state representatives that you can go to. Again, when most of us at this point have already introduced or are in the process of introducing some type of disaggregation bill as it pertains to our state. And most of our states, all of our states have some type of treasury department for the state level. At the federal level, we have to do what we discussed earlier, which again is to either seek an executive order or we have to now fight to get the data disaggregated. Now, that might not be as complicated as it sounds because a lot of this is done through a specific department within the Biden administration that we are able to access that. And we all assume that the Census Bureau has the ability to do a lot of this, but not all the time is what we're finding out. So the Biden administration also has a specific office, and I can't remember the name of it right now, that does kind of put the parameters together as far as data collection. That is another route for us to look at. But again, this is all new to us. Is something that we wanted to introduce to everyone here for us to now start to talk about it and strategize on how can we begin to curb this situation and how do we make it to favor us now because now we're aware of it.
Yeah, and I'm all for it because especially when you have the, like you said, the type of positions that we're in. And even like on the micro level, like I was thinking in Louisiana, I came from Texas to Louisiana where Louisiana has a state tax, city tax. And I'm like, we should be looking at those avenues as well. If we're in an 85%, just like Jackson, Mississippi, if they're being taxed and they're in a 85% population of freedmen, then we need to look at where those taxes are going, what actually is going at the federal and state level. Like, we really need to be proactive in looking at this. Like, it just opened doors for me as to how we can protect our money on the local level and then address the federal, even if we start locally. So I'm so great that y'all had this space.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Tansy, you want to go in there? Art?
If you're looking at Jumbotron, and it's been floating around reparations Twitter for a couple of days now, the Office of Budget Management is starting to have listening sessions for the conversation around how they collect data. So apparently somebody has been paying attention to what we've been saying and some of the other communities of different ethnicities have been saying that they want to disaggregate their data. So there's this conversation is being had. I would suggest to the community leaders and organization leaders that are on this line to take a look at how you can host one of these listening sessions in your individual communities so that we can have these conversations and have our input, because I can guarantee you that the immigrant population, AAPI, the Native American population, and every other ethnicity that has come to this country within the last 50 some odd years will be having their community represented either by professional lobbyists or someone from their community. But they're going to be represented, and we need to do the same. So they're going to start September 15th. If you haven't already, take a look at the legislation. Take a look at the memo that was put out. I will also post that in the Jumbotron as well. But screenshot what I have up there so you can get your individual organizations and community leaders involved. Alan.
Yes, thank you for that, Tansy. And that's a great point. It actually popped in my mind too, so I'm glad you beat me to it. The art, you got your hand up, go for it.
I'm gonna add stuff to that thread, so if people want to bookmark it, that's cool. I really respect what you guys are doing. Thank you very much, and that's it to everybody here. Just do your homework, and I think this is very accomplishable because there's actually quite a paper trail. To keep it short, and just like I said, do your homework and really get. When people try to push back on any kind of reparations or anything, it just requires homework, man. These other groups are getting their thing. Jews already got reparations. Japanese already got reparations. So it's just a matter of paperwork. So don't feel down. Just keep it moving. And thank you guys for the space.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Son, did you want to start doing last thoughts, or did you want to add any more else?
Yeah, so just some last thoughts, some sources that were in the book that you can probably use for data collection that's already being done through the IRS that's just not being revealed to us. There was one resource is called the Tax Policy Center. They are already collecting data as it relates to race. The IRS also has, what's it called? The IRS Statistics of Income Division. They also are maintaining information as it relates to race. The IRS is just very abstinent about using race as for them to track it, because they don't want to establish. Essentially, what's happening is they don't want to establish the disparities that we, as the American Freedmen class, are experiencing as a result of the IRS code. This is not by accident that they're refusing to not track race when it comes to the IRS code. And if we think about how America was founded, and then after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, when the daughters of the Confederacy were doing everything possible, and with the Confederate States doing everything possible to suppress the atrocities that we went through, and then to retell our story a whole different way. While after Andrew Johnson was brought in as president, while they then brought back all those traitors back into the government, who then did what? They were the ones that had the ability to write the IRS codes at that time. That was the quote unquote founders. Okay, and so when we recognize that race is not being left out because the IRS wants to be quote unquote race neutral. Race is being left out because the IRS doesn't want to solidify the argument in the fight of the American freedmen, because they know that that will completely implicate the government when it comes to us, specifically us. So those are just some of the resources. There was another one called the Survey of Consumer Finances. They have also conducted, and I don't have the websites and addresses. I'm pulling the resources from the book just as a reference point for you. Again, the information is as new to us as it is to you all, but I always encourage everyone to continue to look
and other ways of how we can continue to further our fight. So this is just another strategy, another solution that we now have to examine. And the more and more we find out, the stronger and stronger we become as the advocates for our repair to justice when it comes to reparations. I will land there. Thank everyone for attending. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you, Son, for helping organize this. Marshall, Dennis, Tansy, any other speakers wanted to add any last thoughts?
Thank everybody for sharing your time with us. It's Friday, and there are a lot of other things you could be doing, so we really appreciate it. If you are a tax professional, reach out to us, so we can have some conversations because, like Hassan said, this is new to us. Help us get this right so that we can share it with our Freedmen family and we all can get this right. And the last thing I will add is please, please, please go to the office of OBM and and take a look at those on the ways that you can get involved in these listening sessions. Even if you don't host one yourself, find out who is hosting one so we can all jam that one up and represent Freedmen like we did in California. This is what we have been asking for, and this is the time for us to strike. Even if you don't understand taxes, we understand desegregation, and this is the time for us to stick our foot in the door and make sure everybody floods it in. So I'll end there.
Thank you for that, Tansy.
And just let me just jump in for a second to piggyback on what Tansy said. When I couldn't think of the office, it is the OBM. And what we don't understand is that the OBM essentially tells the Census Bureau what to collect and how to collect. And so that was the department that I was speaking about earlier. There's another national organization that most of us know of that has met with the Biden administration, and we met directly with the OBM office to discuss the disaggregation of American freedmen. And so, it is absolutely essential that we do follow through in the jumbotron with what Tansy was referring to so that we can host these listening sessions. The more listening sessions we have, the better for us. They need to know that we are here, we are aware, we are loud, we're standing tall, and we're staying on our square that we want the data disaggregated. I'll land there.
Most definitely, yeah. The OMB meetings are super important, and we need to be there. And like you said, spread the knowledge. So if we need to stream, host multiple spaces, we need to do that because this is such an important time for us to take advantage of. Dennis, and then Marshall, and then if I Love or CJ Willis want to add anything.
Just real short. Like you said, spread the knowledge. And definitely we gotta spread the information. For example, it's tax season's coming up. What if we come up with a talking points memo to show how it affects certain tax laws and how it affects? I mean, we can go out to H&R Block, hand out flyers, talk to our people. We gotta put boots on the ground. Get everybody engaged. I mean, knowledge for the ones that don't have time to do the work, we're doing it for them and making it easier for them to get involved through sight. That's all. Thanks. And thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you, Dennis. And just me personally, like having that information could affect how you spend your next, like you said, tax cycle. You know what I mean? Just knowing about this book. So it's a great resource. Marshall, go for it.
Well, thank you once again, everyone, for coming through this evening. It was a pleasure hosting this room with the Freedmen Party. And this is only our first session. We're going to be adding more books to add to our strategy, to add to our advocacy. I didn't want to get too heady at the end of the night, but in speaking about tax law, if people are not familiar, in 1970, there was this new movement called the Southern Strategy. And part of the Southern Strategy dealt directly with not speaking about racism from the effect of just race and people's colors and skin tones and where they are in the United States, but uh, I forget one of the architects of the Southern Strategy, and I wish I had his name right up front. But there's an infamous talking point, and you can find it on YouTube. You can find it. His name was Lee Atwater. Excuse me.
Yeah.
The man said, "We're not going to talk about race." And forgive me for saying the word. You know, you just can't say nigga, nigga, nigga all day long.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to talk about? You have to code your words. You have to talk about schools.
Mm-hmm.
You have to talk about land. But one thing one of the main things you had to talk about was taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they framed it was, if you talk about tax with an undertone of race, no one will call you a racist. No one will say, okay, they're talking specifically about black people. In this particular instance, with the book we spoke about tonight and some of the tax policies and so forth, we have to now flip that strategy that they used to not only change southern states from Democrat to Republican, but also led to some of the most horrid, uh, legislation after the quote unquote civil rights movement that we had to deal with. I put out to the people in this room and people who will listen to this recording later, the same way they use taxes to try to neutralize us, we have to do that to strengthen us. So we have to take these same tax laws, as I said earlier, and use them to our, if it means that the people in your state who are doing advocacy for reparations have to settle down and look at tax laws. And now part of your advocacy is to flip those same tax laws for the freedmen in your community for their betterment. This is what we have to do. And this is some of the unpopular, unsexy, heady work that we as reparationists have to do for our people. So I just wanted to kind of put that nugget out there. Go back and study the Southern Strategy, and like I said, it was, look up a guy by the name of Lee Atwater and his infamous quote to people, and it's how you flip it. And as freedmen in this country for so long, we have had to do that to work it in our advantage. As Dorothy Brown went through the book and spoke about certain things that were just horrible to us, tax wise and policy wise, we always found a way to work it and work it in our favor. As she spoke about earlier in the book about how her parents were able to, even with not being able to get into any unions and being and having tight funds, how they were able to find a triplex and use part of the wealth that they had through this 3-unit building to help send their daughters to school and help in their way. Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, I
Ah,
could hear you.
okay. If you can hear me well. I can hit.
I hear Sean, but I don't hear. I don't
Yeah,
hear that well.
I can hear them on Twitter.
Is Eric's frozen? Yeah.
Yeah,
Eric's
Eric's
frozen.
frozen.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just me and you.
Yeah, hold on. Is can you all hear me now? Oh, okay. That's for some reason. In StreamYard, I was just out of the matrix. But what I was just saying to everyone is that the same tax laws that were used to try to neutralize us, we have to add this as part of our strategy in advocacy and have them work for us. If it means that certain tax laws have to be changed in your state for your betterment, then absolutely, that is what you have to do for your survival. So that's all I had to say.
it's making me angry because I'm thinking about how my parents work and did all the right things and still got, cheated out of wealth. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the anger is just being fuel for fighting for reparations. So I want to thank everybody for giving us this information and peace and reparations to the room. I land on that.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, brother.
I love clarity.
I just want to say thank you to the space. I'm really excited. I just was emailing everybody here, the local chapters of groups that I'm involved. Like, I really want to do a listening session here in Southwest Louisiana. I think it'd be great. But I want to just say thank you to Cap. That the focus is on the collective and not just in one area. So I really appreciate that, the Freedmen Party. And some of the information is so technical, but the reason why is we have to get technical, we have to get economic, we have to think power, and this is what we have to do. And I know that the spaces seems like everybody should be in here, but it's like this is the real work, also with the other work and the foot soldiers. But the few that are doing this type of work, like, and I will get with you guys on the back channel because I think it's definitely not by chance. I hooked up with the Freedmen Party and also the people that I've met through there. So I'm so excited. I know the ancestors are really pushing it without me crying because I can get really emotional. But I'm just so excited to where I see our people going and what we're going to leave for our next generation. So along with all the bad stuff, but I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you, sis. And I really appreciate meeting you because when I got that phone call from those boomers from Lake Charles, I was so done. And they fired me up. They really, really did. And I said, I met somebody from Louisiana. I got to reach out to her. And like, boom, clicked in. I was like, there it is. Because they was looking for someone that they can touch. And you're right there in their area. So I'm so appreciative of you.
And I'm going to tell you, like, the things that I'm kind of laying out. And when you said they're like wealth of knowledge for me to get grounded in my year is gone. So the ancestors are so amazing. And trust me, I understand. To be here and to connect, it's laid out. That's why I know we're doing the work of our ancestors. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel that energy too. We had Reconstruction in 1865 that was overturned. Then we had the Civil Rights Acts in 1960s. All that was basically overturned. Schools are more segregated now. Things are basically just as bad as back in 1865. So we need to have a third Reconstruction, and this needs to be final. And our institution needs to be indefinite, as well as our support. So I'm really excited about the future, and like you said, keep putting in the work, and just show up and put in the work, and that's all that matters. Any last thoughts from the co-host, Tansy-san?
Again, I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming in and listening because it is Friday evening and you could be anywhere else, but you chose to be here. So we appreciate that, and I would encourage everyone to continue to evolve, to continue to dig out things, learn about things that we typically would never touch because it has been something that is almost censored to us, where we are just uncomfortable to even think about touching it because that is where our greatest oppression lies, in those things that they've made us very intimidated or timid to even examine. And this is one of them. Never did I think, and I have worked in this space of taxes for quite some years and never looked at it from this angle until I read the book, which is why Kat thought it was important that we shared it once we discussed it, so that we can just, again, work together collectively and look at all possible pathways
to getting our full win of reparations. So again, thank you all. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes, this was an amazing space. Thank you again, as Sun and Cap, Dennis, Marshall, Tansy, for y'all helping organize this and coming together as a team. That's what we need. We need a party that brings us all together. We can keep doing our organizations on the local levels that makes things happen and lobbies and does all this great work. And CAP is doing that. They're a great example. I see Friday Jones in the room. NAASD is another great example.
Cuzzo.
Yeah. And then Chris Lodgson from CJEC. So we got people around this country doing the work, U.S. Freedmen Project as well. And all we need to do is just keep coming together, and they can't stop us. We're extremely talented. If you look at even the value of our ancestors to now, we're just as valuable. If our ancestors represented 96% of the economy during slavery, we have that same value today because we keep America running. And in terms of what we're owed in reparations, it's already in the trillions. So we just got to finish the work and make our ancestors proud. So with that, I'll sign us off. But thank you again for coming. Thank you again for all the speakers and people who asked questions. This was a great event. So really,
last thing, if you all are not already hooked up with an organization that's doing the work, if you are in the state of Maryland, CAP is here for you. CAP is here for you. For those who, hopefully you all can hear me. Please. Okay, great. CAP Task Force, CAPTASK Force, FORCE.org, or Eric, give out Freedmen Party. Like this, while we here in this space,
Yeah, join the party, freedmen.party/join, or you can sign up for free updates by going to freedmen.party. We've just updated our policy page, reparations now, Freedmen Reconstruction, genocide prevention. And we have a lot of great people in the party. Just to even see the connection between what happened with bringing this together, even on the local side, about just meeting people with the boomers and finding that connection. That was like amazing. So like the more freedmen that join, the greater the probability of those events. Yeah. So I'm really excited, and we just gotta again keep putting in the work. So thank y'all all again for coming. Yeah, no,
I just want to say this like really quick. It just lets you know, like with Tansy reaching out and everything, it just lets you know how connected the Freedmen are and how interconnected our community was as Freedmen. So I just think that's amazing.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's not an accident. So we definitely have to cherish these moments. If you see, one of my favorite words, it's like serendipity. Like you want to increase serendipity. So just, the more you do the work, the more serendipitous things happen. So thank y'all again for coming. Really appreciate y'all patience. We've been here like 2 hours. So really, really appreciate it. Go back if you missed any of it. We got the video, we got the spaces. So however you want to consume it, you'll be able to go through it. Thank y'all again for coming. Thanks, Cap. Shout out to Cap. Everyone go join Cap if you're in the DMV area.
Good night, everyone.
Yes. And go follow go follow Marshall. Dennis, if you got Twitter, they need to follow you too.
Oh yeah, I'm on there.
All right. Awesome.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Gus. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marshall, for coming.
No problem, man. Thank you for hosting this. This was fun. This is our first one.
This is a lot of fun. We've been testing out this interactive, like with Twitter Spaces in the video. It works better when we were showing content on the screen as well. But this was one of our other times of doing this. But again, thank you for coming. Really appreciate your time.
No problem, man. No problem. Because
thanks, guys. Now it's time for work.
You gotta. Yeah, I was rushing in from work here, Dennis. You got to get to work.
Yeah, I'm headed on my way.
Yeah.
Take care, you guys. Appreciate it.
Stay up, Freedman.
Hey, Dennis.
Good night.
Have a great Friday, great weekend.
All right, you too, brother. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.